Welcome to Watch Club. I'm your host, Justin, joined as always by my lovely co-host, Chris Mason.
Wagwan, Justin.
And we're talking about Luke Cage Season 2 today in a very special binge edition of Watch Club. We're talking about the season in its entirety.
Well, we already binged it, so is this the Purge edition?
This is the Purge edition. We got to regurgitate all the information that we were just binging.
That's right.
So if you haven't seen the whole season of Luke Cage Season 2, here is your requisite spoiler warning.
Yep.
And you should heed this warning.
And maybe you should watch the recap video that we did for Season 1.
Yes, if you're looking to get back into
It'll help.
Season 2, check out the recap.
It'll help.
Very prepared
Yep.
For that viewing experience.
Good stuff. What do you think of the good stuff in Luke Cage Season 2?
Let's start with the good stuff. I think we can both agree that the big highlight, the big standout of the season was Bushmaster.
Yes.
What a compelling and like very motivated villain. Like the whole way through, we knew what he wanted. He didn't waver in that desire.
That's
and
right.
It was always compelling.
It always was. I think Mustafa Shakir was an amazing actor in it. He did a fantastic job. His fighting, both like the actor's ability and the fighting style were so compelling, were so pleasant to watch.
Different from what we've seen so far on this show.
That's right. Yeah, different and much more interesting than Luke Cage's like brawler.
Well, when you can hit that
style.
hard, you don't really need to have that interesting of a attacking approach. But I guess Bushmaster was just all about tactics, and there's that great shot of him studying Luke's moves and then going out and countering everything that Luke throws at him. I just thought that the way that he was handled was brilliant, considering the source material on this guy wasn't...
It's pretty thin.
Pretty thin, not the most compelling comic book villain. We had him at number 9 on our list of the top 10 awkward supervillain names.
That's a good placement.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And, you know, I was expecting some reference to the fact that in the comics, his brother gets grafted to a giant serpent body and becomes the new Bushmaster. Not a lot of serpent illusions. Maybe they wanted to leave that to the comic books.
Yeah, I think the Netflix MCU is, or the Netflix Marvel universe, whatever you want to call it, is being really careful about how far into the supernatural it wants to go, which I think is smart, because it's supposed to feel like the real world. And at a certain point, like if we I don't know, if the dragon
popped
up in Harlem, I think I might check out of the series completely.
That's totally a fair way to go about it. What did you think of Tilda, new character?
I thought she was very good. At first, I thought she would just kind of be some plain old milquetoast daughter character. I thought she had a very compelling arc. The actress was good. Gabrielle Dennis was very good. What did you think?
I have to agree with you. A lot of the moments that later in the season really surprised me, considering, and I think you were meant to feel that way early on of like, okay, what is she going to play? What role is she going to play in the larger narrative? And ultimately, we came to a very compelling place. It's set up for her to take on kind of an antagonist role in the next season.
Yep.
I think we left off with her at the high point of her arc, and I think it's only going to get better from here.
I liked her relationship with Bushmaster. I wish that there could have been more of that.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I think that she went through, at the hands of Mariah primarily, so much bad stuff that her transformation to some kind of a villain might actually be credible.
Yeah,
you know?
Totally agree.
We were seeing an origin story play out over 13 episodes or whatever, however many she was in.
Yeah, and she did have a really great dynamic. Like the fact that they had the Nightshade connection was really interesting right from the get-go, and I wish they had spent more time on that. We did get a few episodes of that dynamic, but it would have been nice to see more of that.
Another actor I wanted to single out was Theo Rossi as Shades. In the first season, he was okay. He was maybe a bit hammy sometimes. I thought he was really impeccable in this season.
I fully did not like Shades last season. I thought he was kind of lame and one note and not that interesting. Total 180 this season. I thought he was one of the most compelling and fun to watch characters on screen. He actually had like an emotional arc that made total sense to me. Wasn't too thrilled with the way it capped off.
It's disappointing that we'll see him go to prison, it looks like, in the in the next season if he's around at all.
I hope he does have a role to play in the next season, but it was just kind of like, I appreciate that they went for the angle of he is so heartbroken by Mariah that he turns on her, but the fact that he completely made himself ultimately so vulnerable to that turning point at the end that saw him be sent to prison.
Yep.
I hope that's not the last we see of Shades.
Yeah, it's like we saw he rose above the cliche of the sensitive gangster, you know, because he's sensitive but also kind of like a bit psychopathic, a little bit. He's conflicted and layered. I think there were so many like one-to-one dramatic scenes in this series, in this season, more so than in the last season, if I recall. And to me, I think my favorite one was actually him and Comanche sitting back to back, holding huge guns in the dark, having a very emotional talk with each other, you know, where they're trying not to be emotional.
Yeah.
Also, anyway, I
that was
thought
great.
that was a really
Their
great
relationship was super interesting, and it was short-lived, but it was a really a highlight for the season, I thought.
I was committed to you. Everything. He would have figured that out eventually. Me and you could have ruled Harlem together. Forever. No, because you need to hear this. You talk to me about the light.
So let's talk a little bit about what we didn't like, the bad.
Cool.
For me, one thing that really stood out like a sore thumb was the Danny Rand episode.
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't crazy about that. Of all the primary Netflix characters to bring in,
That's right.
I realized that there's a relationship, the Heroes for Hire, it's a big thing, but I would have much rather seen Jessica show up, or Daredevil show up, or even Punisher show up.
Out of all the Netflix Marvel characters, I think they got the ones that are at the bottom of my list also. Yeah, the Punisher, or if Daredevil showed up, that would have been a huge revelation.
Yeah.
So obviously they want to save that for the next
Obviously,
season of
yeah.
Daredevil. Jessica Jones might have been a good crossover. I didn't mind the Danny Rand of it. It was one episode. It was contained. You know, I didn't mind it because, like, my favorite thing about Iron Fist is how everyone kind of makes fun of him and rolls their eyes. Here, I thought we saw him trying to be cooler and more down to earth, you know, than he normally is, and that self-conscious attempt to be cool, like when he's in the barbershop, was actually like kind of fun.
Yeah.
And the fighting was great. Like Iron Fist's fighting has always been cool.
Right.
So,
that was the
down with
one
that.
thing, the redeemable quality was the fight scenes, but I find him as a character such a difference from everyone else.
Yeah.
He just kind of separates himself, and that episode really sticks out in my mind as a low point. Another thing that I wasn't too crazy about, even though it made total narrative sense, was Claire Temple taking off a few episodes in. I really liked the dynamic that she and Luke had. It was really interesting. It was an interesting moral conversation that they were having.
It was a really good scene. You know, one of the best one-to-one scenes I think in the entire season was the one where she leaves him.
Yeah.
But to me, that represents like a bit of a missed opportunity because, like mid-season, she's leaving. Bobby Fish leaves. He's not seeing eye to eye with Misty. It seems like they're really trying to isolate him, which I thought, oh, and they're talking about hero for hire. It's going to push him down this like dishonorable path. But then that didn't really come to fruition,
right?
Which I thought would have been more interesting than what I think was the biggest flaw was there was just too much built around Mariah. You know, I didn't find her interesting. I thought Alfre Woodard, the actress, was doing like an okay job with what she had. Like at best she was believable, and at worst she was just hammy and maudlin. Maybe maudlin's not the word, but you know, hammy, over the top. And I thought that they had her falling into the same patterns over and over again of like pouring a ridiculously large drink of rum and throwing it away. And I thought that like it would have been better served with more Bushmaster and less Mariah.
I think Mariah worked as a foil for a lot of the other characters in the show. Obviously, Tilda's relationship with Mariah was crucial to that. Shades as well. I think you're right. I think they should have taken more of an approach of the periphery around Mariah, because as far as I'm concerned, we saw her arc last season, and she didn't really change all that much. You could argue that she maybe became more aware of her evil tendencies and more comfortable with them, but that wasn't as big of a change as some of the other characters around her were making, and that's what I wanted to see more of.
And it felt like there was no mystery or even much internal conflict with her coming into her own in that
Almost
way.
no internal conflict.
So,
it was more just a rejection of the past and then an acceptance that the past is still a part of her, which other people go through as well, but I found other people, like Tilda's relationship with the past was way more interesting. And I would have liked to see more of that. Obviously, Bushmaster was motivated by the past. Luke's relationship with his father, which kind of petered out a little bit. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the relationship with his father.
So my big problem with the relationship with his father is I feel like we're given too many mixed signals on how we should feel about the character, which can create a good conflicted character, but it left me in a place where I'm just kind of apathetic about their reconciliation. Like I don't care if they make up, because one, like I don't see it having a huge effect on Luke, who I do care about, and two, the preacher, the Reverend, is awful. Like he goes back and forth between being like wanting to be or actually being like a caring father and a good Reverend, to being just a hypocrite. And I mean, when you're coded as someone who doesn't practice what they preach, that seems like a pretty clear indication of how I'm supposed to feel about him. So
I liked him more early on when he was calling Luke Carl and invoking like who he really was. That seemed to go away. His whole perspective on the situation seemed to change pretty drastically, where at first he was taking an antagonistic approach, where it was like, we need to reconcile because like that is your responsibility as my son, versus later on down the line, and maybe his interactions with Claire may have had an effect on this, but he seemed to take a more soft approach, and that wasn't as interesting to me. I like them butting heads, but like reluctantly respecting each other.
yeah.
More so than I did them kind of having the conversation of like, I screwed up, you screwed up, we all screwed up. It didn't have the same kind of payoff that I was expecting.
And then as soon as they hug it out, it's, I'm going back to Georgia,
Yeah.
you should come with me,
Yeah.
the end.
It's over. And it really didn't factor into the rest of the season in any meaningful way. So that was disappointing.
Easter eggs.
Yeah.
There were lots of them. I know
Tons
you're
of
a
them.
huge comics fan. I spotted a few myself, and I'm not even as well read as you are. What were some of your, rather than list them all exhaustively, what were some of your favorites?
The ones that really stood out to me are the ones that I saw like a narrative link to the reference, and like it had a thematic importance beyond just being like a cool reference. Like there was obviously tons of those where you got like your piranha is a character from the comics with actual piranha teeth, stuff like that.
Special shotgun that they used.
Exactly. That stuff was cool, but to me the stuff that really stood out was there was a few shots of Luke reading the book by Ta-Nehisi Coates, Between the World and Me, which is written from the perspective of a father talking to his son about being black in America. And the reason that stood out is for two reasons. One being that had a lot of narrative significance, considering a lot of the season was about paternal relationships between Mariah and Tilda, between Bushmaster and his father, who passed away, between Luke and his father, obviously. There was a lot of that was driving the story forward, so I thought that was an interesting parallel to draw. The other important thing is that Ta-Nehisi Coates writes comics and has actually written Luke Cage in the form of Black Panther and the crew. Misty Knight is also a part of the crew.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool tie-in. I think it's also worth noting that Ta-Nehisi Coates is like one of the greatest writers active who's writing and thinking intelligently about the black experience in America.
100%.
Obviously something that this show speaks to a lot, and which you and I can't really speak to.
Right.
If you're interested in that part of the show, you should find other reviewers and writers who are talking about the show from that perspective.
Definitely.
I think it's worthwhile.
100%. The other big Easter egg or reference that stood out to me was the Godfather shot at the end in the last episode, where you see Misty looking at Luke as the door swings closed. Was almost shot for shot recreation from the end of The Godfather.
Yeah.
Which speaks a little bit to, we were talking about this earlier, about what is Luke's role now?
Yeah,
is he a crime boss? Is he a sheriff? What does that mean for the future of the show?
So yeah, we're coming to the end of our episode here. I think it's a good time to talk about, like, you know, how the season wound up. And to me, it's like they were trying to do something where they put Luke in like this precarious position between being like a crime boss and a sheriff. Those are two like terms that are used in that final scene. But I just don't see the crime boss of it. Like, yes, he now runs the club that the crime boss used to, but he has like kept organized crime out of Harlem. Like, that was the deal he made with Carbone, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't like he's not profiting off of it in any way. Presumably, if anyone comes in, he'll be there to deal with it and sheriff it. But I just don't see him like in this precarious moral position that the show wants us to. Is there something I missed?
I don't think so. I think it's part of it is we don't understand the logistics of that role, right?
Yeah.
From what I understood and what I took away is that he's willing to negotiate. He's not going to just lock up these people and go on a crusade to shut them down. He'd rather control them and have them afraid and have them maintain their operations outside of his area, but he's not going to go after them. And another thing that really stuck out to me was Misty's reaction to that. Misty, who for the entire season had backed up Luke's crusade and had been like, you know, he can operate outside the law for the most part, she kind of took a turn towards distrust very quickly. I can understand where she's coming from, but it just felt, I would have liked maybe a scene or two that built to that rather than just having that revelation happen in the last few minutes.
I mean, it feels like the season, like so many Marvel seasons, it felt too long, and it also felt like this would have been a good place to arrive, like mid-season, maybe episode 8. I don't know, or maybe not. Maybe I'm out of line. What do you guys think?
Yeah, let us know what you thought of this season in general. Let's talk in the comments. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Did you hate Bushmaster? Did you love Mariah? We'd love to know.
I know that people out there on the internet are raising the question: is this the best, second season of a Netflix Marvel show? I want to know what you guys think about that.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Let us know in the comments. And once again, thank you so much for joining us for Watch Club. If you want more Watch Club, Chris, every Friday.
Friday, we're doing Cloak and Dagger. If you're into Marvel shows that have a different, I don't know how to pitch Cloak and Dagger right now. It's a good show. I'm enjoying it. It has a young adult sort of feel to it, much different than Luke Cage or anything on Netflix, but I'm into it.
That's airing every Friday. And for more, like, subscribe, ring that bell, obviously, to find out when the new stuff is coming out. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Check out these other great clips from WatchMojo and subscribe for new videos every day.